So this is what a typical user would see. So the cursor comes in, it gives them a little, heads up. This is what the product does. So it gives them a little education on it, and there's some videos. Then you can say go to the application. Right here is the interface. It gives you a search window. It gives you the ability to select the time, and then it displays auto-generated dashboard for you, or you could create your own custom dashboards. So just a little example here on the search here. Let me work this out here. It gives you a quick hint here on your search. You can search by host. If you have services configured, meaning you can group a bunch of services, say all these services or servers apply to InSpy or whatever application you have. You could drill down on a specific application. Specifically, if you had BPM instrumented, you could drill down and say, let me see all my response time and availability information from there. It'll look for information that's assigned to a database category, or you can just start typing and doing your own search query. Here I'm just going to search on host here, and I'm going to pick the host in our lab, which is online banking system that we called it. And I'm just going to do stars to show me all the hosts that start with OBA, basically. So this is an auto-generated dashboard for me. I'm going to go back a little bit further in time to get some data. So let's go back to 1 day here. Okay. So here in my window, I have an auto-generated dashboard for my metrics, and scrolling down is my logs and events for all the hosts that basically start with OBA, and I could create this expression how I see fit. I could pick one host or how I see fit. Just a little bit on the metrics first, and I'll get into the analytics. The interface is also HTML5 based, so everything you see here is pretty much doable on your smartphone. Obviously, the size you'll have to zoom in and zoom out, or a tablet, either Android based or iPad. So it's no Java plugins, no nothing. It's all HTML5 based, which is very nice because you don't have to worry about all that nonsense. So say, for example, I want to see all the CPU utilizations for all these servers that I just selected. So here I can see in a quick graph, here's all my CPU. If I wanted to, I can actually play it over time. So you can see here it's actually playing over time. So if I want to do analysis, and that's just a visual analysis of the metrics. I can actually pick multiple metrics in here, and oops, I cleared it out. Let me pick it again. And I'm just picking CPU, for example, but you can pick whatever metrics you want. And I can do things like correlation of these metrics. So it'll tell me, basically, of these metrics, which ones have a similar trend line. And it'll give me the ratio here. And you could do this with CPU, memory, network, application response time. As we start getting into data beyond metrics, you can pull in both logs and events into the analytics pane. And this is, again, an auto-generated dashboard. So just in 1 day, we have seen 12,000 either logs or events. I could switch this to say, let me see just the logs. So we've seen about 11K logs and 633 events for that time period. It sifts through all that data and says, what are the most significant events or logs that happen within that time period? And it highlights them on this problem time. So you can actually move this problem time to the time, that somebody's reported the issue, or you're just doing analysis, over a period of time. You could drill down on these significant messages. So this one right here, showing there's a network interface here. Here we see some web logics. Oh, by the way, here is the legend. Circles are logs, diamonds are events. If there's anything that's new or rare that really happens, it'll highlight it as either a diamond with an R or a circle with an R, or a circle or diamond with an N. So it's actually a new event the system uses. It also correlates all those message in the message groups. So if they're similar, it'll create a message group for them. You could use that message group inside the event analytics details window. And you can do things like, hey, I like this message. I want to see it in the GUI. I can ignore it. Maybe it's noise that the system was generating, but we don't deem it important. We could also do something like track it. And track it basically takes that message group and creates it into its own metric. So now I could take logs and events and not only see them from a root cause and the text representation over time, but I could also say, how is that metric, that event or log happening over time? So I'm just going to pull up the track and logged window. So these are just message groups that I created. Again, so this is a metric based on the message group itself. I could take some data from it and parameterize it, say, what percentage of that data had this parameter. Either here the parameter was severity. So you can pull that into a window. You can also group all your servers that are particular to a service and call it a service. Here I called it Advantage Inc. And again, it has an auto-generated dashboard. So here I could sit there and say, of that time period that I selected, and again, I could, pick an hour, a day, week, or a custom time that you want. I could look at a service view, and this is basically saying, out of all the things that I grouped, and I grouped databases, web services, and servers in here, where is the issue at in my service? So you can see right here that this server, OBA app 4, had an issue with CPU and pulls a graph. And you can also see corresponding trend lines for all the OMs, all my events for that perspective. And then you can actually see these are the significant messages for that service. So again, let's go back to this hosting again. Host. So real quickly, if somebody reported a time over here, they have an issue, the active event browser may have auto closed those, so they don't see the messages. So they got to go into that interface and say, I want to go back either 24 hours, a day, a week in time. And it displays it, but it displays it with a whole bunch of other stuff, and it doesn't give you, the visual that you need when you're doing analysis. Here, again, you could go back in time. You could quickly see what are the events that happen with those particular servers. You could see what's important. You could drill down into these events. And it'll highlight them. It'll tell you the details, information on there. It'll also tell you, how many times they've occurred, what's their occurrence here in your environment. So it's a very good, post-mortem analysis tool for looking up history of the data. You can also add, more columns of the data if I want to show, obviously host name is significant, so you can see which host generated that alarm. You can also do things like when you're doing a search, where it says, you could just do start typing here. And so I want to say, I don't know all the metrics that were collected because, I didn't set these tools up and, but I know I want to know things about hosts and network. So here, it pulls up a quick list of here's all the metrics that we're collecting on host and network. So quickly I could pull up things like network CPU, network interface, network performance. So it gives you that kind of search capability within the interface. So here I went through and picked out, here's all the metrics that are related to network performance. I could drill down here and say, show me all the traffic patterns for these hosts. I'll just pick here. You can mouse over the data, and also, for the host that I'm looking at, it actually shows me, here are some of the events and logs for that time period, were the most significant. So again, it actually went through 4,000 log and event metrics message and said we grouped these in 233, and of those, 30 of them were significant. I could say, which ones of them are logs, 15 of them were logs, and 15 of them were events. So it does that kind of sifting for you. Um, there are a bunch of dashboards that are out of box, but you can also create your own. For example, this one is geared for BPM, so it shows you, which BPMs have availability issues. I could say, so here's the online banking app for that time. It looks like it's pretty green, and at this time we had one transaction failed. I could pull up the response time for that app, to see what the response times are. So these will be your BPM scripts that you have running. You can also see, what are the details. Is it client time? Is it network time? What are the breakdown of the BPM metrics for that app? You could drill down into that application. Now this actually will show me all the BPM transactions that we have scripted in the ViewGen script. So right here, these are all the transactions we scripted. We can actually, let's do this. So here I'm just going to select all these individual transactions. And I can play them again over time to see how, where may be the deviation in response time. Now I can also, based on all these metrics, either from the HP tools or the messages from Splunk or Logger or the events from OMI, and I could set up alerts for them. So let's go to my, I can pull it down. So I can sift through the alerts. This is for, for one day that we set up, but I can actually, shorten this time. Let's go back 4 hours. So this will tell me, we had some response time alerts with our applications that we set up. We could go back even further. Let's see if we had any high alerts. Yeah, so we had some abnormal message groups that happened. Part of this test is we were testing performance both with integration with Logger, with Splunk, so forth. So we see a lot of alerts during those time periods. You can actually drill down into those alerts. to see their occurrences, their frequencies. You can drill down even to the detailed, what window will I pull up here? Yeah, so you can drill down to the specific alerts. I basically configure these alerts to say, of all the metrics we're collecting, whether they're system metrics from SiteScope or OM agents, or application metrics from BPM, or log metrics either from Splunk or OMI messages coming in, let's baseline them and show me when they're abnormal. So that's basically a lot of our learning we set up. For that to really be effective, you want to collect data for a period of time to get that baseline, so you could have that normal trend line. And just for example, I'll show you what I mean about the baseline. So we'll just pick host again, and we'll pick all the hosts in this application, and we'll just pick, we'll go back in time here. Let's say we'll do a month here. I just went back a month in time, and it's still scrolling, but that's 2 million messages. That's the power of the big data engine in a memory resident database, is you could sift through a lot of data fairly quickly. If you try to pull up this month's data in OMI, you might as well go to lunch, come back the next day.
So, is it pulling every single Splunk log in and storing it separately, or is it just parsing the logs and kind of doing its own index on those?
Yeah, it parses those logs and it takes key fields out of them, and you could specify, you could customize that, or you could take what they provide out of the box, and then wraps it around metadata for the vertical backend and for reporting and auto generation of dashboard. So it takes a subset of ArcSight or Splunk data, puts metadata around it, and then inserts it into the vertical database. So it's not all the data, but it is a subset of it and metadata.
Okay, so it's not pulling in 200 gigs a day or whatever. Or
No.
That we're right up against always.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So right here, I'm just going to show you an example. These are all the network packet rates for all my servers for a month. Now with that data in there with the metrics, you can do some, prediction here. So here I got my trend points, or I picked an extra one here. It's okay. So I could say, let's predict out 2 weeks. So it gives you, here's your seasonality trend points. What are they? Are they ascending, descending? In this case, they're flat. So most of our spikes have been, you can see periodic, even though they're big. You can see there are a couple thousand packets. They weren't sustained over time. So over time, the trend line will be flat. You can actually, it actually tells you the confidence level, how much data it's collected. We set up the collection on some of these servers at a different time period. And you can also select that thing, and it'll actually, sometimes it's hard to see, but it actually draws a little sleeve of the baseline. Here, maybe I'll select one with a different color here. Yeah, it's kind of still tough to see. Yeah. But it actually shows you, if your data pattern sustains this way, over, what will it be in a week or two from now. So you can do a little bit of predictive analysis from taking data from your baseline and saying, if you follow this trend over a day or a week, your data patterns will either be ascending or descending. So you could use this a little bit. Do I need to add bandwidth, or do I need to add capacity to my environment?
And can you also wrap kind of notification around that? So, I mean, one of the things that kind of one of these utopian goals that I have is that, all of these magical tools are working together in harmony in our environment, and they're monitoring what's going on. They're monitoring the network and the servers and the services and storage and all kinds of other things that are throwing zeros and ones back and forth. And from that, they're starting to kind of build out a trending pattern for each application. So, from the front-end InSpy servers maybe to the back-end database or to a service bus, maybe it normally takes, let's call it 20 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds for that transaction to flow from a Apache server to, say, the service bus headends or something like that. So 10 milliseconds back and forth consistently over time. But then all of a sudden one day, now all of a sudden it's taking 20 milliseconds. So 20 milliseconds probably is not the end of the world. 99.99% of our people may not even realize that or understand that. But, that significant a jump could be an indication of something else either wrong in the environment or something that's heading in a wrong direction. So based upon some of those kind of trends and patterns, is there ways to be able to put some level of notification in to say, okay, if these transactions or if this flow from point A to point B, or if the CPU on this is higher than this certain threshold, then that's a normal norm. If it's 20% or 50% above what the normal behavior is for that, send an alert out to person X, Y, and Z so they can at least take a look to see why the system is not performing like it normally would throughout the course of a week or a month or a year.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let me just show you a little bit of the alerting capabilities. And since you picked response time, let me use that as a metric. So we'll drill down into the application we care about. We'll pick the metrics we care about. Since you said transaction response time, I'll go down and we'll select that. So here's transaction response time. Here's all our transactions, and I'll select them all. So right in that same line, there's create an alert. So this is basically how you create an alert for the system. You pull the metric you care about, and you just select this window. Here I have the ability to say, do I want an abnormal based event? This is on the baseline. Do I want to do a hard threshold on the event? And basically, I just want to select all threshold based and all metrics here. So I'm going to pick abnormal just to show you what it looks like, and we'll select these metrics here, and we'll say define alert. Please choose no more. Okay, so abnormal, I didn't choose 10. Oh, it says I did choose them all. Oh, there you go. I had them all selected on the bottom. So whatever I pulled up into the graph shows up already selected. So let's trim this down here because it says for abnormal events, don't do more than 10. So there's 10. And then I could give the alert a title, whatever I want. I could say this is HPE AOB app abnormal alert. I could set whatever threshold severity I want on there. I could put description. Right here is the AQL. That's basically the query language for the product in Vertica. It does a lot behind the scenes, but it does give you the capability to create your own and do customization if the out of box doesn't work. Now I have the OpsA, what do I want to check the data from? So here I could sit there and say, let's just check every hour, an hour's worth of data. Okay, I could trim that down to minutes if you like, but here we'll just say hour. And we'll say next. And then I say for that query, for the alert, what do I want to run it? How many times do I want to run it? So we'll say we'll run this every hour. Now here I have the ability to, do I want to do it above the baseline, below it, or both? Or I also could do above and, this value. So maybe you could say, is it above the baseline and, 20 milliseconds or what have you. You could add in there. Or if you wanted to hard code 20 milliseconds, you could just pick the threshold one and code it that way. So if I would have went back here, oops, once I picked the abnormal, it sticks there. But you get the point. You can pick the kind of threshold you want. You could say how many times does it occur over? Is it greater than, less than, or equal to this period? Well, let's say I want to know it's when it's greater than 0. So when it happens more than once, I could preview the data. Oops, sorry. We'll say when it's above. Oops, I'll check that. So it'll scan through the data and tells me, just a little test to see if I had any occurred here during that time period. We had none in the last hour. That's fine. Now here I have the ability to say, do I want to send an email? Do I want to run a script? Do I want to send an SNMP event? There also is an integration that you can do with OMI that makes it two-way. You can sit there and say, based on all these alerts I set up, automatically send an event into OMI. Now, we haven't done that in the lab per se, but if you do that, if you create an OMI event with your OpsA threshold events, basically you'll be feeding that back into the log analytics window. So if you start sending these events back into OMI, you can actually do analytics on OpsA alerts, which is, I don't know if HPE kind of realizes that, but it'll inherently work that way. But here you can send a quick email out to whoever you want to if you don't want to, send it to OMI and so forth. And you could set these alerts up for all the metrics you deem. You can actually group message groups, so you can actually send these alerts on log messages based on their frequency and occurrence in your environment. Does that answer your question on setting up alerts?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So that pretty much is, the quick and dirty of the product. There's a lot it can do, of course, the more you feed it data. There is, things like if you're looking at your Windows environment, it'll pull all your Windows logs if you want to. So you can actually drill down and see, service stopped and so forth. You can sit there and say, these are important or not important. One of the things about OMI and the traditional HP methodology is you're instrumenting, right? But when you're instrumenting, you're instrumenting what you know. So you're looking for known stuff and you say, I want to be alert on something that I know is bad in my environment. What OpsA kind of gives you is it gives you that data also and does analytics, but also gives you maybe something you don't know about. So maybe you didn't sift through all these log messages and know that you're going to get this error or exception in a log message from Splunk, or you're not looking at Splunk all the time and you need somebody to automatically look at that data and tell me something I don't know about. So I think that's really one of the bigger values of the product, because when you get stuff from Sitescope and OM and BPM and you're instrumenting OM I alerts and you're going out through X matters, he wants it to be meaningful. So he spent a lot of time. So this is stuff he knows about. He doesn't know when it's going to happen. He just wants to know, I'm instrumenting a tool for when it happens and notifies people. But what do you do when stuff happens that you don't know about? And those things are traditionally dug down deep in the log that maybe Splunk pulled up that data that you're just not, it's not apparent. You don't know if this exception happened during that time period. And I think that's, one of the really other values of this product is that, pulls that data up, forward to you.